My name is Angie, and this is the story I wasn't supposed to find.
And I'm our sister, Cindy. We started this podcast with one name, Stella Smith, our great-grandmother, a woman who gave up 2 daughters, disappeared from history, and left behind almost nothing.
No photos, no grave, no explanation, just a blank space where a person should have been.
Until a DNA test changed everything. Turns out, Stella Smith wasn't even her real name.
Her name was Estrella Suarez. She came to America from Spain as a child. She married twice, left 2 families, and somehow managed to vanish not once, but twice from history.
In season 1, we found Estrella's beginnings in America. We found family we didn't know existed. We sat across a table from cousins who'd been looking for the same woman we had from the other direction. And we thought we were closing a chapter.
We were wrong.
Because season 2 is where things get even more complicated and even more personal. New relatives surface, new documents turn up, and some of the answers we finally found led to questions we'd never thought to ask.
This is Buried Threads, a podcast about family secrets, silence, reinvention, and what happens when the past refuses to stay buried.
If you're listening for the first time, welcome to Buried Threads. You may want to go back and listen to our previous episodes on season 1 and season 2 in order to hear all the details of our great-grandmother's life as we know them so far and our search for her.
Cindy, we knew when we started working on this podcast that people would likely help us to find new information, either with tips or by searching themselves. And our listeners did not disappoint. We've received many, many tips and ideas for research, and we received information that became a thread that we could pull. That's how we got where we are with Grandma's adoption records, with the records of Marie Christine's adoption.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the journey we've taken to get to this point in detail, but in a nutshell, someone following our story saw the newspaper clipping that we posted about the adoption on Facebook and Instagram, which included the name of the presiding judge who presided over her adoption hearing. And from there, they were able to determine where the adoption actually took place, which was something we didn't know. Now, Angie, you were already on this search, and it really became a process of elimination. There were multiple counties that were possible. I believe that you would have solved the question of the location of the adoption, the county where it actually took place. You would have gotten there eventually. But the information from our listener definitely sped up that process. So before we talk about that, let's begin where you began the search, with the information that our grandmother, Marie Christine, had secretly collected and saved throughout her life.
Yeah, so our mom shared about this in a previous episode that when my grandmother passed away, my grandfather said, hey, there's a safe deposit box. Let's go see what's in it. He didn't know what was in it either. And when they went and opened it, what was in there were all these documents that she had been saving regarding her biological parents. And so she had collected them. She had hid them in the safe deposit box. He didn't know it was there. Why she chose to make it a secret, we can only speculate. We don't know, but she did. And so he was just going to throw those away. But our mom said, hey, can I take them? And then she took those and she brought them to me. And who, by the way, had 0 experience in genealogy, but I am as nosy as nosy gets. And I'm also like a dog with a bone and don't ever let up on things. So she decided that was, a good fit.
Right.
I mean, when I was a kid, my nickname was Barbara Walters, I guess. So like, if you're old enough to know that reference, So some of the things that were in that safe deposit box, there was a letter from the Illinois Children's Home and Aid Society that was written in 1932 about the beginning of the termination of parental rights to the Hickmans, just kind of explaining this is what's coming. You can kind of sense from the language of the letter that there had been a question, what's taking so long? And so this was just laying it out.
Yeah.
There was also a handwritten letter from the Illinois Children's Home and Aid Society that was included in there as well. And also a letter from the Illinois Children's Home and Aid Society with a summary of Stella's history and Marie Christine's from the caseworker perspective to the Hickmans. We talked about that in one of the early episodes. Initially, I took that information as absolute truth, and that's what I was trying to research, but it was just...
Right.
I guess the best way to describe it is whitewash. It's not that the things in there were inaccurate, but it was generalized in such a way, which probably was by intent, that you really couldn't flesh out, any significant details. And so our speculation is that these items that were gathered probably came from her adoptive mother's papers. So probably when the adoptive mother, Nellie Hickman, died, these items are there because these are things that she would have received as part of this process in adoption. Nevertheless, these are the letters that were included. There was also the birth certificate, her adopted birth certificate. So it had the name Norma Jean Hickman. Then there was also this important, we talked about this a minute ago, the newspaper announcement of an adoption and the name change from Marie Christine. Now, I will say, having adopted kids and also just been in the adoption world, life was different, evidently, but it's very odd to me. Having your name changed in adoption is very standard course. That's not a huge deal. And to get a new birth certificate with the information on it, same thing. When I adopted my kids, I got a new birth certificate as if I was the one that gave birth to them, like listed, on there. So that's not
Right.
unusual to me. What was unusual to me is they printed in the newspaper and they said, on this day, this was her old name and this was her new name and this was the judge that presided over it. This is where they live. And I just found that to be odd, especially since there were other kind of notations about wanting to keep things secret. But nevertheless, it was there and it actually became helpful to us.
That letter about the parental rights, the termination of parental rights, they laid it out how the process would protect them from being found by the birth parents. The caseworker actually says that. So it's not like it wasn't something that they thought of. It seems to have been a part of the process, but somewhere some wires got crossed.
I'm wondering, and again, this is total just spitballing speculation. I'm wondering if typical adoption rules of law at that time required there be a publishing. And so they weren't able to sidestep it around. Don't I could think of. I don't know. I also find it interesting that there seemed to be this concern about keeping her information confidential or keeping it private. But then we know that by 1934, Stella was living 4 houses away. So maybe there was a reason to be concerned. Maybe there had been, attempted contacts. We'll know someday when we get access to these adoption records and we'll be able to know more. But it just makes you wonder. But that newspaper clipping became really important because the clipping was already clipped from the paper. So we couldn't see where it was published. We couldn't see the city. And I had tried to research and find that myself and had not had any luck doing that. And so we just weren't sure. But we did know the name of the judge and we did know the name of the attorney that presided over that. And then there was also the birth record with the boards. Mm-hmm. So again, you talked about this, but it was a republished redrafted birth certificate. It was drafted in 1983 that was giving the original information. And I do find that interesting also because a judge would have likely had to have given permission for that to happen because the record was sealed. And so, but nevertheless, how that came to be, we don't know. Yes. We don't know. But there it is, handwritten in 1983 that showed the name, the DeBoards, which is also how we knew from the beginning what the biological parents' names were. And so it was actually a good set of documents. Had Stella not been someone under multiple aliases, it might have been a lot easier to track her down than it ended up being. But those are the documents that were there. Those are the documents my mom first brought to me and said, hey, can you see if you can find anything? And this is what we started working with.
It's really interesting. I mean, without all that information that Nellie saved and then Grandma saved, our search would have been very different from the very beginning. We wouldn't have had names. I mean, there's so much information we wouldn't have had. We probably would have gotten there eventually, but I don't know what that path would have looked like. I think compared to what many people have, it was a treasure to find that in the safety deposit box. Who did attempt to get her adoption records. We're going to talk about attempt number 1. That should be a spoiler for people. Attempt number 1, from her original birth record, we know that Marie Christine was born in Sangamon County. And you actually even found newspaper clippings of Estrella coming out of the hospital that correlate with the date Grandma would have been born and all of that. So we have verification of that. But we know that she was born in Sangamon County, Illinois. That's where Springfield, Illinois is, the state capital. And we also know for lots of reasons, lots of documentation, including more newspaper articles. We know that Christopher's parental rights were terminated in Sangamon County as well. For any listeners who may not know, that was also posted in the newspaper because they were trying to make him aware. Christopher did not have a permanent address, we don't think hardly ever in his adult life. And so they were trying to inform him, hey, your parental rights are going to be terminated and you have this much time to contest this. And Marie Christine's name was also in that posting as well. So, very different time. But that was in 1932. You contacted the county clerk's office in Sangamon County and you put in a request to have the judge unseal the adoption records. And that request was granted, thankfully. So when they contacted you, and you can tell us more about this, but Sangamon County couldn't find the records. And it wasn't a matter of, oh, we had a fire, they're not here. It's like, no. This did not take place in Sangamon County.
I had originally sent off the request to have access to the records. And the clerk wrote back pretty quick. And we had some good conversation. She was very helpful and helped with a lot of different things. And she said, here, fill this form out and I can have a judge sign it and we can get this unsealed. And I was so excited, here we go. And then like the next day, get back and they said, not here, wasn't adopted here. And I'm like, I don't understand. And that's when she finally said, well, the reason they're not here is that she wasn't adopted in this county. And it just was mind blowing because all of our records, everything had been focused on Sangamon County. That's where all of the documentation had been up to this point. And so I said, well, where would it? And they said, well, they have no idea. And so then it became, kind of wondering. So the next logical place was McDonough County, which is where her adoptive parents had lived. And then there was also questions about the Knox County. Again, we talked about this earlier. So finding the records, it just kind of took a backseat. When I got the decline that it wasn't Sangamon County, it was not the top thing I was reasonching. And so, I just hadn't really dug in, but that was the thing. Is it there? And then we talked about this before, but when Terry saw one of the letters that came from the Children's Home and Aid Society, it mentioned something about Knox County. And so then we began thinking, well, maybe it was Knox County and trying to figure it out. And it talked about a supervisor in Knox County. And we kept thinking, well, Knox County is a small town, Galesburg. It's not going to be supervising over Springfield, So we couldn't kind of figure all those pieces out and hadn't resolved it. But we knew that it wasn't in Sangamon County, trying to figure out where might it be. I've talked about this before, how I use AI to help. Now, I want to say this again. AI is very tricky because on the one hand, if you're giving empirical information, you're asking very detailed and specific questions, it's amazing. It's unlocked more than a few things in this journey. However, if you ask it to do anything that involves any kind of inference, it will weave a wild tale and it will sound really good and it's all made up. That's all happened to both of us more than once in this story. And so, it's always this love-hate thing. But one of the things I have found helpful is if I go to AI and I say, here's what I'm trying to figure out. Here's my roadblock. Where else should I look? And I've had, again, more than a few times has AI come up with some really great solutions of places. I have to still do the looking, but it's here place I didn't think to look, and here's where you can do. And so that's what happened. I went to AI and laid this out, and I was trying to figure out this. At this point, I was thinking maybe it was Knox County because we had this conversation and there was a connection, and so trying to figure out what it was. And so what AI explained to me is that all these records in the state of Illinois are divided into these, I think it's 4 or 5 quadrants around the state, kind of like districts. And so all of these, it's probate records and it's also guardianship records. And they're kind of stored in these regional storehouses. But the area that includes all of these areas, so it includes McDonough and Knox County, are all held in Macomb at the university there, Western Illinois University. And they have a place in the library you can go. And the records are accessible and available. Well, it just so happened that we're figuring all this out at the same time that we were going to Estrella's grave. We had just found it. We were going to go be meeting there. Paul was coming with, Terry was coming with. And so my mom and I decided, we live about 2 hours away, a little more from Macomb. We decided to make a day of it. And we were going to go in the morning and go to the library. And, I guess I had folly in my mind because I thought we were going to just walk in and give them a few names and pull out the information. I should know it's never worked that way so far, but that's kind of what we were thinking. And we're going to get this information. And then in the afternoon, we would be then meeting with Terry and Paul and going to the grave. So we get there bright and early and great facility. The staff were extraordinarily helpful. I have nothing but really good things to say about it. It's on the 3rd floor. So we get up there. These people I feel like have been living in this library for most of their life. So they know the ins and outs of it really well. And so I walked in and said, this is what I need. And of course, if you know me, this will not strike you as unusual, but I use every captive audience as an opportunity to tell the story of Estrella and what we're doing. And so I was regaling the whole room with the stories of this and getting them all kind of invested in it and, looking up our podcast and all the things. As I explained what I needed, they got the supervisor involved. So he's the head. I think he's been 25 years. He's been there. So came out and walked through with him what we needed. So they have these binders that have the card catalog, I guess you would say, have an index to all the files. And again, I had plenty of information. I had biological names, I had the adoptive names, I have dates, judges, all the things. And so they go through, they look a couple different places and it's not there. And so of course I'm devastated. Come on, it's got to be here. And he says, no, you understand. If it's not here, the only place it could be then is at the Knox County Courthouse. If it's either here or it's the courthouse. There's nowhere else. And they said, basically, you have to just show up and you ask them and they'll just give it to you. And I'm like, I can just walk in and they'll just give it to me. Yeah. And so we had a conversation with him. I laid out kind of why I thought it was Knox County over McDonough County. Asked, is this logical? Does this make any sense to you? He obviously couldn't make any definitive answer, but he said, I tend to agree with you that Galesburg visitor signature is kind of compelling. It probably is Knox County. So they're gathering up papers for us to go over, but they did give us this warning, which ended up being very fortuitous. They said, now, when you get there, it's possible that they're just going to tell you that they don't have them and they're going to try to send you away. And In fact, the assistant even said that they have a history of doing that. So they're
Yeah.
kind of notorious
Yeah.
for that. But said, you need to tell them, take this paper to show, but you need to tell them that you've already been to IRAD. You've already been here and their records are not here. And so that you know for sure that they're there. And so I said, okay, do I need an appointment? Nope, you can just go and you can show up. So, I mean, here we go. So we had to drive, I don't know, 40 minutes, maybe a little ways away and backcountry roads. And so again, getting really excited here. We're going to get this information. So we get to the courthouse and it's a beautiful big courthouse, right in downtown area. And we park. And as we're walking up, we noticed a sign that said no cell phones in the building. And I thought that's kind of weird, but I really didn't think a lot about it. Well, we get to the front door, literally, they're like, you cannot come in the building with your cell phone. Take your cell phone back to the car. And I'm like, even if I don't use it, it's in my pocket. No, you cannot have a cell phone in the building. So I take my mom's phone and my phone, go out to the car and drop it off. What's concerning to me is I had notes in my phone that I had AI help me draft of exactly the questions to ask when I'm asking for this information to make sure that I ask it correctly and, and some scenarios in case they ask it differently. And of course, I can't use those now because I have them in the car. I have my iPad too, wouldn't let me use that either. So those things in the car, go back inside, go through the metal detector. And so then they send me to this room that's literally back of the building all the way around. We get in there. They have huge vaulted ceilings and files all the way to the roof. And so I go in and I'm just going to say, even from the beginning, they just weren't that friendly. And I'm asking, this is what I need. And of course, without even not looking at one piece of paper, not looking at one folder, we don't have that. And so I was warned this might happen. I bring out the forms showing I've been to IRAD, explaining and just really pressing. Yeah. And they're just giving the runaround. And so finally, I'll be honest, I was on a short fuse. Yeah. I was about ready to lose it. And so I said, let me just explain. I have driven 2.5 hours and I've been searching for 25 years for these records. They're in this building. I've been told that they're in this building. I'm only without it. She kept going around and around. And finally she said, well, we don't have them. We can't get them for you. They're not indexed. And so they're probably just in a dusty corner somewhere. Well, I've been looking for 25 years. So just point me to the dusty pile and I'll go through them for you. I will find them. Oh, we can't do that. I'm real frustrated. She's shutting it all the way down. And mom is standing next to me trying to do as mom usually does. Yeah. Here's the bright side. I'm not happy. And they know that I'm not happy. I wasn't disrespectful, but I wasn't happy. So anyways, I leave. And I'm walking to the car and, I'm fuming the whole time. Right. So I get to my phone. Mom laughs about the story, but it's so true. I literally take my phone out and I open up the AI that I've been talking to. And I literally just type in there like I'm a whining 2-year-old and tell it what's happening. And while we're doing this, we're driving away. Now, this is a real small town. So we're like 5 blocks away. And AI writes back and it says, do not leave the room. You do have standing. This is exactly what you need to say. And this is what you should say. Well, we've already left. So I'm like, okay. So I get my phone out and I call back. I've been gone from the building 5 minutes. Call back, get the exact person I was talking to. Yeah. And I read this exactly as my AI partner is telling me to say, basically just asking to be elevated to supervisor. I think my exact question was, what is the process for making this official? I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but making this a legal official request. Because basically, if a judge issues the request, they can't just tell me I don't want to go look in the dusty, whatever. So when I called, keep in mind, when I left, they did not take any information from me. Right. I mean, told you, they never looked at anything. They did not take my name, not my number. They didn't take anything from me. They didn't receive anything. They didn't ask anything of me. So there's no way they were ever in a million years going to be able to help me or provide any. What would they do? Right? Because literally, there's nothing. So I call back. I recite this script exactly as the AI said. And her very first thing is, oh, I'm so glad you called back. I was just getting ready to go up in the attic and go looking right now. And I think I might be able to find it for you. And I'm like, are you serious? So then I'm waiting and I'm waiting. So I didn't do an official request. She said she was going to do this. So then I keep calling back. And every time I call back, I get someone's voicemail or I get the person at the desk next to her saying this person's not available. I don't know if it's intentional, but she didn't appear to be working very often because I called, a dozen times and it could never get through. So it was just really weird. So at that point, then things just kind of quiet down because I'm at a dead end. I know the next step that I need to do is that I need to go and make this official drafting that's going to compel a judge to undo it. But I haven't done it yet. And so it's just kind of in this, again, we're doing the podcast, a lot of different leads going on, and this has fallen by the back burner. And so that is the story of attempt number 2. It is interesting that when I was telling the story to Terry was saying, interestingly enough, that Edward is Estrella's youngest child. and also Terry's dad, that he was a county sheriff in Knox County. And when I told her the story,
Yes.
she laughed and said, that does not surprise me at all. Knox County is notorious for that. So I don't know what's going on in Knox. Like, they just are, I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
They clearly don't have the view of sharing this information. They were not in any way they could be described as helpful.
Sure. And it's interesting because Sangamon County seemed to be, when you called that county clerk, which seems like because it's a bigger place, maybe you would expect that they would get a lot more requests and that could become really overwhelming.
Right.
But they seem to go out of their way to help you figure this out, and very quickly got a judge's order and all of that very, very fast.
Right.
And then Knox County, just nothing.
Yeah. It clearly is a mindset shift.
For sure. And I don't know what causes that, but I guess we should say to anybody listening who might be heading down a similar path looking for records, like, first of all, don't get discouraged if it takes more than one avenue, more than one attempt. Also, be persistent. Very likely that if you have to go to more than one source, you're probably going to get more than one.
Yes.
You're going to get different levels of helpfulness. Let's just say that, just depending on how it goes. So that's 2 attempts. Attempt number 3, as we were doing the podcast, we did post the newspaper clip of Marie Christine's adoption announcement. And that was the one you were talking about, where it shares a lot of information, but the way we received the newspaper clipping, we have no way of knowing where it was published. We did notice that it does refer to Sangamon County.
Right.
Well, the fact that they specifically mention Sangamon County makes it sound like this isn't Sangamon County for sure. And I had never thought of that before. So, but that was where we had originally thought Springfield. Now we thought maybe a clue was Knox. Now we're thinking, well, maybe McDonough County. And McDonough County is where Macomb is. That actually is the county seat. At the time of adoption, the Hickmans lived just outside of Macomb, but, definitely that's the area that they lived. One of the things a listener, a follower, someone following the story realized, they saw the presiding judge's name as well as the attorneys who oversaw the case in the newspaper clipping. And they knew a way that we did not know to actually look up where that judge presided in that time frame, and that told us that the adoption took place in McDonough County. Now, I just have to point out the comedy. You wouldn't have felt it at the time, but now we can laugh about it, right? You were in Macomb at IRAD. They don't have the records. They sent you to Knox County, and you were very confident. We were very confident that that's where those records were.
Back in Macomb.
And when in all actuality, they're back in Macomb. Now we know that is where the adoption took place based on the newspaper clipping. The judge who presided, he was a presiding judge in McDonough County. So we know for sure that that's where the adoption took place. Now, let's talk about your communication with the office at McDonough County. Attempt number 3.
Slightly more helpful than Knox County, but not very much. It's still a process. But I called the county clerk to request the records. The way to start this whole ball rolling. Here's my request. They said they would process that request and then we get back to me. And they did call me back the very next morning. They called back the next morning, and the county clerk, his name is Ian Fisher, he said, the records are sealed. They are, in fact, they didn't use the word sealed. They used the word impounded. So Illinois has a law that says any adoptions that took place before 1946 don't need a judge to release their information, or at least certain kind of definable information that the state has said the adoptees have legal access to this information. And so that's kind of the rationale of why I was asking this information. But what he said was these records were sealed, impounded. And so it would take a judge having to issue an order in order to get them released. So I'm thinking it's going to be a similar form like I did in Sangamon County. So I said, where's the form? What I fill out? And he said, oh no. Well, actually, I had to ask a lot of questions to get an answer. He just kept saying that wasn't the right way. Finally, after a detailed discussion, he said that I needed to do a filing, that I needed to actually file a motion into the case to ask the judge to issue this order. Well, I am not hiring an attorney for this. So I go back to my friend AI, who walked me through the whole process. So Illinois has a Odyssey file program. Everything's online. So walked me through exactly how to go into Odyssey and get that figured out. Helped me to actually draft this motion. And so basically the motion was written as asking the judge to make a declaratory judgment in this case in order to have the information released. So legally, we're not opening a new case. We're going back into this existing case and we're filing into that case. In order to do that, you have to have a file number. Well, I'm not even sure if a file number exists because this is from 1934. But if there is, I don't have it. So I called back to the clerk and I asked the clerk to tell me what is the file number. And he said he couldn't tell me that because the file's redacted. He can't even acknowledge that anything about it. Well, then what am I going to do? I didn't know. So go round and round with him, get nowhere. I go back to my AI friend who said, hey, Illinois has a helpline. And at first I was like, yeah, Illinois is not that helpful in many things. I had low confidence voting in this, but let me tell you, they actually, a live person answered the phone in 2 rings and stayed on the phone with me for over an hour. Like, shockingly, right? But anyway, but basically it's a legal helpline for people who are navigating the legal system without an attorney to say, this is, this is what you do. So I get on there, I tell them all the things I need. They said, you need this file number. I said the same thing. I know I need the file number. He won't give it to me. So they got a supervisor involved. I don't know, went through all these things. I was on hold for a while, but they came back and they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And so they were able to give me a workaround without having that file number. And so we were able to get into file this motion. Of course, it's Illinois. So that meant they had fees attached to all this, but whatever. We're going to get this done. So filed in. The way the motion is drafted, the other person named on this is Ian Fisher, the county clerk. Okay. Well, it just so happens that Ian Fisher's job is to review all of the Odyssey filings that come in and determine if they're going to accept it or not. So he's actually reviewing the actual filing that I just submitted, compelling him to give this. So he didn't accept it the first time because I can't remember, there was some typo or something I'd done wrong. But he called me and said, I'm not going to accept it. This is why you need to get back and fix this. And so I did. Sent it back. And then he called back again and he's like, you're suing me. Is that what you meant to do? Well, I think this is how it's supposed to work, isn't it? And he wouldn't really answer me. I guess that's kind of a weird question to ask. Anyways, he said, do you want me to accept it? Yes. He says, once I do, I'm going to charge your credit card. Yes, I'm aware of that. So he did and accepted it. And then he said, okay, you need to call the judge now and you need to get here on the docket. Okay. So I'm doing what I need to do. So I called the judges. Get an appointment. And I think it was only like a week and a half out from, wasn't very, very long out. She said, you only need 15 minutes, right? Yeah, 15 minutes is good. This should be nice and easy.
Yeah.
Gave me all the information. I told her that I lived far away, so I wanted to do this by Zoom. That was fine. She gave me all the information to log in. When we get everything set up, we're super excited. Here we go. So we get to the day of the hearing. Now I'm thinking this is going to be it. And I really believe, I still believe this, firmly believe that these documents are going to give us an incredible amount of information. They are going to cover 6 years. And again, having my own children who've been adopted, I know what kind of records, at least in the current day, that they keep related to that. It's going to be a thick file. There's going to be a lot of information. They're going to be tracking a lot of different things. And it's going to provide details about Stella's life and a perspective that we just don't have right now. So I'm super excited about this. You were obviously present on Zoom, as was our mom, and our brother wasn't able to. We were all there ready to listen to this. And right away, she says that I did it wrong. we were joking beforehand. That I said, it looks like I'm suing the clerk, but I don't think I really am. I think it's just that he has to have his name on there because I have somebody else. But evidently, I really am suing the clerk. I really am suing the county clerk. And I didn't do it the right way because he wasn't served a summons. I also needed to file a summons. He needed to be served by the sheriff. I had to wait until that happened, and then I could go back and get another hearing. So I was really frustrating. And I said to the judge, thank you for explaining this to me. And I said, I just want to ask this question. Am I doing this the right way? This just all seems, especially when I compare this to what I went through in Sangamon County, there's just so many more hoops. Am I on the right track? And she said, yes, but you have to do this. So I said, okay. I went back and drafted the summons. My AI friend helped me with that. Filed it through the Odyssey program again. It was accepted by Ian Fisher. He accepted the summons to his own thing. I had to then take that information and contact the sheriff in McDonough County and then give them the information, show them the document. Once it was accepted, then a stamped copy. I had to show them that stamped copy. And then the sheriff had to go probably across the hall because it's a very small town. They're all right there together. But anyways, and serve the clerk. So he was served at 2:30 on that Friday afternoon. Then the sheriff sent me back this document showing that it had been served, and here's that information, which then I had to put that into Odyssey again to verify that it had been served. And then I was able to call back and talk to the judge again. But then from the time that he was served, he has 30 days to respond. I'm sure it's just standard. So that fell to be like July 5th or July 6th. And of course, the judge is on vacation that week. So it's the week after, the second week of July. And then we go in and she said, you still need 15 minutes? Yep, 15 minutes. So hopefully when we go this time, all the ducks are in a row, everything is lined up, and we should be able to get these records released. And like I said, it's interesting because on the one hand, I don't ever say things with a few words. I'm always lots of words, lots of explanation. So when I was preparing for the first hearing, I was thinking about what I was going to say. And I was really in my head drafting this kind of impassioned plea, talking about those 25 years of search and the harm to our grandmother and all the things.
Yes.
And I realized the judge doesn't care about any of that. They don't. And this is where AI helped too. AI is like, don't say any of that. Because the other thing that becomes complicated, I mean, I don't think at this point it would matter because everybody's dead. But here's the thing. The name that everything happened, Stella DeBoard, wasn't even a legal name. Neither was Stella Smith. So technically, if everybody's still alive, that could be legally undone and pulled apart because she wasn't even the person that everything was issued under. Also, no reason to bring that into the story because the judge might find it remotely interesting, but it would also make things a lot more complicated. I'd already scripted out. We're going to say the bare minimum. We're going to keep it to, I'm here before you today because Illinois law provides that we have access to this information. And so our standing is this law and the fact that we have a child and a grandchild of the adoptee and, everyone else is deceased. And so hopefully it will be cut and dried at this point and we'll be able to get those records. And then our minds will really be spinning as we'll have probably, I'm guessing, a wealth of information to wade through.
I agree. I just want to say, from my perspective, I had even less information than you did about what was going to happen at this hearing. We get there, we're waiting to be let in. We're let in, and judge, I think I was the first one that they asked, "What case are you here for?" I didn't know what to say. I'm like, Angie? It's like, oh, you're here with Angie Hansen? Yes, I am. I don't know what to say. And I just kept my mouth shut. You did very well. You asked the question. And I felt like the judge was relatively helpful, but it was just surreal. And the realization when we're all in virtual court, that is really when we understood that we are suing the county clerk of McDonough County. We did not realize that that's what was happening. We just thought, oh, you just fill out this form, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, no, we are suing somebody and we don't want to sue somebody. We just want these records.
Hey, just one little side note, separate from the story, but maybe tangential. I have been previously, I'm not currently active, a CASA volunteer. So that's a court-appointed special advocate for children who've been abused and neglected. So anytime someone comes into foster care because of abuse and neglect, they're assigned this court representative. And then you kind of, you represent them all the way through. Parents have their attorneys. The state has their attorney. Anyways, did this for a couple of years, worked with, a couple different families. And so because of that, I have much experience in a court like this, in exact family court. I've been on the Zoom court. Not McDonough County, but the county that I live in. But so that part of it I was familiar with. So I felt like I had a little bit of understanding on just some of the mechanics of how that would look. But I was expecting that I would be let in the room first, and then I would have to say, oh, there's 200 people waiting in the room to be let in. But they just, it didn't work that way.
That would have been good because they also kept accidentally letting other people into the court.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, are you here for that? Oh, you're not supposed to be here. And they'll kick them out. Yeah. So I just thought it would be interesting to share with people about this Illinois law about adoption records. It might help people understand why we feel so confident that we have a right to this information. Also, there are laws like this in most states. There are a couple states that are much more restrictive. I can't remember all of them. I know New York is one of them. But the date that I have on this particular one, at least the last time it was updated was December 2019. I'm not sure when these laws came into existence, but it might be helpful for people to know kind of what this law is all about. So Illinois has an Illinois adoption registry, and through that, people can access records, various adoption records. Birth parents can, adoptee siblings, or the adoptee, but then their siblings or aunt, uncle, different relatives if they're deceased. And it expands on that. But also where our standing is if the adoptee, which is Marie Christine, our grandmother, is deceased, a surviving spouse, adult child, or adult grandchild has a right to these records. And of course, we have an adult child and multiple adult grandchildren. So that's one thing. And there's a lot more information about that, but there's certain non-identifying information that they can have access to. So all you have to do, you go on this registry and you're able to receive this information that is non-identifying. So things like the age of the birth parents, their race, religion, and ethnic background, their general physical appearance. I thought that was really interesting just to know their basic physical appearance. You can know their education, their occupation, hobbies, interests, and talents. Angie, this is a big one. Existence of
Yes.
other children born to the birth parents. That's a big one. Information about the birth grandparents. If they are immigrants, their reason for immigrating into the United States, their country of origin, the relationship between the birth parents, detailed medical and mental health histories of the child, the birth parents and their immediate relatives, the actual date and place of the birth of the adoptee, the reasons that the birth parent stated for placing the child for adoption, how and why the adoptive parents were selected, who selected the adoptive parents, and whether the birth parent requested or agreed to post-adoption contact with the child at the time of placement, and then the frequency and type of contact. Now, I have no idea, Angie, how much of that information was collected when our grandmother was adopted. We know obviously some information was because we have that letter from the Illinois Children's Home and Aid Society, but we don't know in totality. And then the other thing is the adopted person who was born in Illinois prior to January 1st, 1946 can file to request a non-certified original birth certificate. And you and I were really surprised that our grandmother got a copy of her birth certificate. It's a handwritten one. So that means they did select what information, or it's possible that there was information that was left off because it's handwritten, but it also has a date on there and the name of the person who did it. And it was 1983. Well, considering her adoption record has extra impounded seal on it, we don't really know how she got that. Pretty incredible that she even got that. And kind of want to say, you already know who the parents are because the state of Illinois, the county that we're in, McDonough County, already gave that information to our grandmother. That's the information that is available in the state of Illinois under normal circumstances. Now, for whatever reason, we have this extra sealing, but with everybody being deceased, it seems to us it's a pretty good argument that we should be able to go get this other information. And yeah, we're probably not going to go into the courtroom and be like, hey, we just really want to know our family story and we're doing a podcast on it and we would really like to have this information. But it is true, as children, as grandchildren of the person who was adopted, we want to know the mental health history. We want to know the medical history, if any. We want to know all of this information for a variety of reasons. But there's a reason that the state of Illinois has determined that adoptees and their families, not just the adoptee, but also their descendants, should be allowed to have this information, are allowed to have this information. And since no harm can now come to our great-grandmother or our great-grandfather, who are both passed, or even our grandmother herself, it seems reasonable in our eyes that you have a pretty good case for getting that information. But that might be helpful for people to know if they're on the search for records and just assuming that a judge has to unseal something, you need to check in your state. That might not be true. There might be a lot of information, maybe not names, but other very helpful information that could be available to you without a judge's order or without suing the county clerk. It's under many circumstances. We don't know what's in the files. We don't know why they were impounded. Angie, like you alluded to, we have theories, maybe because of the nature of the case, maybe if this was not a surrender as much as it was a child being taken, something like that. Maybe some illegal behavior on Estrella's part. We know there's a parole officer attributed to her, and we've had some listeners say, well, that could be something else. That could be a caseworker or something like that. And that might be true, except we've also encountered several people labeled caseworkers. So I'm not sure. We're not 100% sure, but it's possible. Or maybe some other reason that we have no idea. But I would love to hear. We're going to be on social media or right here. I would love to hear from our listeners. If you have ideas, if you've done your own research, or if you're just a curious person and you're listening, what do you think? Why do you think that these records are impounded under these circumstances, especially considering the law that makes this all open and the fact that the adoption took place in 1934? So I would love, I think I would love to hear from our listeners what their ideas are.
Well, and again, we talked about this before, but I think it's a really big clue and a really big deal. That the adoption was 1934, but by 1937, she now moved to Macomb, and by 1940 is living 4 houses away. We've talked about this before, but that does not sound like someone who abandoned their child and walked away. That sounds like someone whose child was taken away. And also, when you just consider some of the other language, it just makes you wonder, was there repeated pieces of that where she kept, I don't know. Imagination can go wild, but it's just, here, I'm going to say this. I adopted 5 kids. If any one of the biological parents of the kids I adopted moved 4 blocks away from me, I would have lost my mind. I'm just going to say, right? Like, it's a big deal. It's a boundary issue.
Sure.
But also, I will say, I don't believe that Estrella ever had contact with grandma, at least not identifying herself as her biological mom, because it was never about, I had this person, I just need to find her again.
Right.
It was not like that kind of thing. It was, I want to know who she was. I want to know. And so if there was ever contact, it was done clandestine. I don't think that she ever presented herself with who she really was.
I agree, especially from what our grandfather has told us and what our mom talked to her about. Mom said she really didn't have any conversations about her childhood or anything like that with grandma until she was on her deathbed. And then grandma was telling her some things, and it was something that was left open. And we do have a court date. Did you say that? We do have another court date.
Second week in July.
We will make sure to update everybody after that hearing. Hopefully we will have some news on the records, if not have the record in our hot little hands, right? That's what we're hoping for.
I was thinking about that. We did this virtually because obviously I didn't want to go to court for 15 minutes and drive more than 2 hours both ways, whatever. But then I realized that, like, when they're awarded, I'll have to go pick them up, which is, it's fine. It'll be worth the drive. It'll be worth the drive for sure. But it's just like, they're not having to email them to me, right? Maybe they will, but I doubt it.
I doubt it. Maybe mail, but you might be better off at that point just to go pick them up for as long as regular mail might take you.
I'll tell the judge, I'll be there in 2 hours. We've said it before that Estrella was a woman who kept her secrets close.
There is much more for us to learn about many people in our story. Each piece of information is like a puzzle that not only fills in the gaps of the story, but also helps us to better see the whole picture.
We're just going to keep exploring these questions. So what is in those adoption records that a judge put an extra seal on them in 1934? Is there any information on Florence in Marie Christine's adoption record? That's a big one. And answer the question once and for all, was there a twin with Marie Christine? I want to go on the record saying we have no reason to believe. We have nothing that tells us that she was a twin. Correct. We're not convinced that that's the case, and we're looking for confirmation of that. Just as a reminder, why we keep bringing the twin piece up. So Stella told many lies, but there were also often truth pieces woven through. And so trying to determine with each piece what is true and what is not is a little bit tricky. And so when she put on her youngest son's birth certificate that he was the 7th live birth, of course, that led to questions. Who are the other 4? Long story short, the 3 of them he knew they were. There was 4 that they did not know. Her story was that she had 2 sets of twins that died. Well, we know that she had 1 set of twins. We know that they did not both die, but that was part of the truth woven in there. So then the question is, did she just say a second set of twins as just an easy way to account for these other 2 children in a nice and streamlined and relatively clean, easy way? Or was grandma a twin?
Right.
And we don't know the answer to that question. Right. So,
yep. And then other questions which don't really have anything to do with the adoption. Where did Estrella and Walter live together? We talked about Walter and this new find about their life, but we need to explore more about where they lived together. Did they live in Springfield, where we found that newspaper announcement of their marriage? Did they live in Chicago, where we found, they actually got married in Cook County. Where did they live? Or somewhere else altogether?
Yeah.
And did they have any children? Again, we can account for 6 of 7 children that Estrella put on Edward's birth certificate, but maybe they had a child together. And if not, why did she put down 7 children there? So...
yeah, I have one piece on where they might have lived. It's not an answer, but just here's the one piece. So I took the advice that the other reader had done and started searching by address. Well, I had an address. I think it was from a census. I had an address from Walter from before he got married in Chicago. So then I was searching that address just to see what pops up in different publications. And shortly before he married Stella, that address was like an apartment in a house, like a big house, like an apartment. That address went up for rent. So what that said to me was he did not stay in the same house because he was with another woman before Stella. He did not stay in the same house. Like he left that house. But again, I have not found where they went. Was it another house in Chicago?
Yeah.
Was it, down to Springfield? And the answer is I don't. So we also cannot forget that we still have questions about Estrella's origins in Spain, her family and her birth year, and when she came to the U.S. And spoiler alert on that, one of our DNA matches is Nina's son, Phil. And Phil is the one who helped make the recording and give us the recording of Nina that you've heard. Phil's wife, Susan's mother was huge into genealogy. She sent me a picture, 2 massive, huge trunks that are just filled with all her mother's research. Not just the Suarez family, but her family as well, but lots and lots of research. And so she's been a wealth of information all along, but she's been going back through kind of like we did and looking at documents again with fresh eyes. And there's a lot to look through. So it's a process. But as she's been going through, she's been sharing some different things. And so she's been sending us a few things that give us some hints about maybe some things in Spain. No answers yet. Well, maybe some answers. We did end up finding the exact city in Spain that Manuel was from. We knew the area. Now we knew the exact city and province, which is helpful because if Estrella was from the same province, which we have not proven that, but if she was, then we'll be able to find baptism records there. Those are actually fairly easy to find, but you have to know the exact province. They're not searchable across all of Spain. You have to be able to go to that exact institution and be able to request them there. So definitely some information that's kind of being shaken loose there. And then also just hopeful as she continues to look through those documents, she might find something else. She said, she was telling me yesterday, she said that her mother always said she had her documented that Estrella was born 1907. But she said, I don't know where that came from. Like, that's what all of her records say, but I don't know where she got that information from. And she sees the same as I do, that the census says 1905, that she was 15 in 1920, which would make it about 1905. But she wants to know, where did that come from? So that's one thing she's hoping to find when she's looking through there. Is there going to be some document, something that gave her mother the belief that it was 07? So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a year or two, that's very reasonable to be a year or two away from that.
Yeah. Well, with the census, it all depends on when they came by too, right? Like,
yes.
If it was early in the year versus late in the year,
Yes. And this probably isn't the last and certainly the not least open question that we have, but we really don't have any official records of Christopher after 1944. And then family sightings only up until around 1950. So we would love to find out anything we can about his latter life and his resting place. That's probably made difficult because he likely used an alias, but eventually we're going to have to go digging back into Christopher. And I know that side of the family is also very intrigued to find that. I'm very curious to know about that as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of DNA matches because I kept thinking, maybe this is a judgmental statement, but if he was living a freewheeling lifestyle, maybe there was some seeds spread across the Midwest. I've not found evidence of that yet. So a DNA match, if such a thing existed, a DNA match would blow that wide open, but not yet. But the DeBoard family goes back. I mean, we've got them traced back to the 1400s, the French Huguenots coming over. I mean, it's a big, huge spread. So there are a lot of DNA matches. That is a massive cluster.
Yeah.
Well, there are so many questions remaining, and we're going to just keep researching and letting you know what we find as we find it. Lately, it's been kind of a fast, rapid fire as information is coming through and other people are jumping in. But, it's not always going to be like that. And so we're just going to keep digging, keep looking, and keep sharing as we find.
That's right. If you have any questions or comments or helpful ideas for research, we're Buried Threads on Facebook, Instagram, and Substack. And that's also where we share lots of artifacts, photos, different documents, and things like that. You can even go back and search those to see ones that we've already posted if you want to take another look at them. You can also find more episodes of Buried Threads on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube.
Until next time, keep pulling those threads.
Thanks for listening. If you're walking your own search through DNA, silence, or a name you can't quite place, you're not alone.
If you want to go deeper on this story, you can find us on Substack at buriedthreads.substack.com. That's where we release every episode, along with documents, photos, and the kind of details that don't always make it into the audio.
You can also find and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you haven't yet, subscribing or leaving a review makes a real difference in helping other people find us.
For more photos, recap videos, polls, and the occasionally chaotic behind-the-scenes moments, find us on Facebook and Instagram. We're at Buried Threads.
And if something we've shared has stirred something in your own family story, we really do want to hear it. Reach out. You might be surprised where a single thread leads.
Until next time, keep pulling the thread.
Just knowing she existed, she was real, she had a name.